One way that you can add images is through Illustrator symbols. And we're going to use that to add a couple things. So you find those by going to Window and then down to Symbols. And you can use the symbols just by clicking and dragging out. And most of these are vectors that you can use with the perspective selection tool. And these could be images that you use for building decoration, for billboards, things like that. They can also be ways to add some nature. So there is a library, one of many, down the bottom left. You can go through all of these to check out what they have. Things like flowers might be good. Nature is one that we'll be practicing with. And they also have trees and grass and foliage. All right, so you can always take some that you think you might use, drag them out to the side of the artboard, and I probably wouldn't go too crazy with these. You know, wouldn't have a ton of rocks and butterflies and scorpions around the place, but if something seems to work for whatever reason, go for it. All right, so you can put these in perspective, but I feel like these also are just fine to be flat for the most part. And oh, the one thing I didn't tell you guys, and you guys should be able to figure this part out without having me to do it, is just make sure you have it in your trees and clouds when you get to this part, right? So we had made that tree and cloud layer so that you have those in there. And this is still just practice, but you know, when you're doing your project, you'll have a lot more going on, and this is why we're just practicing that so that it's easy for you to organize things. So with the symbols, you know, same thing. I like to make copies, so those are already there. And you know, I'm not putting these in perspective, but just the rule of perspective is things that are closer are larger, and things that are far away get smaller. So when I make a copy of this, I'm going to hold shift to keep it proportionate. You know, I'm going to make it smaller so it looks like it's behind these trees. And then this is another reason why you want things to be in layers. You can see that my trees are in front of that building, and it really needs to be below. Okay. All right, so that's one way to use images that are already given in Illustrator. And then don't forget that you have transparency and blend modes. So I can always soften something like these clouds, and I can always play with the blend modes, you know, to change their appearance a little bit. Okay. So symbols is one way, okay? Another way, let's say that you want to have an image on your building, like maybe, you know, an advertisement, or you want a logo on the billboard. You can grab something from the internet and make it a vector. So here's an example of that. So I have already searched up something we see every day, like a Starbucks logo. And a quick way of placing something is you just click and you drag it, right? So that's a shortcut of placing. It's like I dragged over a large image, so I'm just going to move that off the artboard and hold shift to resize that. Now, this is not a vector yet, so when I go to shift V, I'm not able to grab this and put it in perspective. It doesn't respond. I need to make it a vector first, and the way to do that is to image trace it and expand it. So if I were to do, just click on image trace, you'll see it's going to make it black and white, right? Which might work for you. And what it did is it took two colors, black and white. I'm going to hit undo. I want it to keep those colors, and I'm going to hit 3 colors, so that's how many colors it will have. I would probably choose something between 3, 4, or 5, trying to stay away from something like high or low fidelity, because that makes it a pretty large file. Alright, so we want to expand it to make it a vector object, so you can see all these anchor points now. So you'll notice that most likely, it's filled in this negative space. And I'm not too worried about that. Most of us will be able to get away with that just with the blend modes. But I don't really want this TM, So what can we do about that? Well, it's expanded and it's live painted. So if you guys have been in my class before, this might ring a bell. You can paint that out with the live paint bucket. Shortcut is K. And you can just paint that a none fill. So I just painted those letters out. And basically just real quick, when you're live painting, everything that you're going to paint is in red. So this negative space is connected to the same as this. So if I were to do this, I would lose all the white, which in this case is not that bad because I'm going to put it on my billboard and my billboard's white, but my billboard might be orange and I don't want that. So, just be aware of that when you guys are painting. Okay, so I'm going to take this guy now. And because it's a vector object, I can take it with my perspective selection tool. And I can now place it in perspective. All right. And we do want it to be proportionate, so I'm holding shift even though it's in perspective. And I would definitely zoom in so you can see what you're doing. But you can see it's a little slow to respond just because it has a little bit more data. Now, other ways to deal with the negative space, you don't have to paint it all. Let's say that it came out black or white or another color. You can always select this and then play with the blend modes, right? So these would take away the white colors. These would take away the dark colors. These will add more contrast. Okay, so that's another way to easily deal with that. So now, here's my image, and here's a text here I had that I'm just going to bring over for my billboard. So there is the design of my billboard. And then I wanted to show you how to use just really simple 3D revolve effect. And we're going to do that to make some poles for our billboard because mine's going to be on top of the building, right? So it's not just floating. And then making a quick stop sign. All right, so using the pen tool, just making a straight line and then going up to Effect, 3D, Revolve. Always hit Preview. And what is this doing? It's taking what you drew and it's revolving it at a 360-degree angle. So it's making it round in a sense. And then what I like to do is go to More Options and then add another highlight. And I'll zoom in and hit OK so you can see what that just did. clicking off, now you can see this little pole-like thing, right? And the added highlight is that gray area. And I'm just going to make a copy, right? So we don't have to keep doing that unless you want to change something about it, like color or where the highlight's hitting. And now I can put it here in for my sign. So I'm going to say for this guy that it is half that size. 1. So there's 1. And here's 2. And I'm going to put it at 1.25 just so it looks like it's going with the grid there. Okay, so that's how you might use something like 3D Revolve for a billboard pole. And then we have our pole already here. And if I zoom in, what you're going to do is you're going to go to your shape and we're going to use our polygon tool. And when we draw, we're just going to add with our arrow keys to make it have 8 sides. And then you would choose it to be, you know, a sign color that corresponds and play with the text and everything. And then this would go into perspective. And then you would just take your sign. All right. Actually, seems like it would make more sense for it to be on the orange side. Okay. And then you would put your text in there as well. All right. And you know, something you can do is bevel that. So what I just did is add a side here, and you know, I don't want it to be 50 points, and type it in. You know, I probably want it to be something like 4. Let's see what that gets us. Maybe even something like 2. No. So bevel is just another 3D effect, and it's just adding a side to it. So I might do something like this. I take my pen tool and I draw an object. And you kind of have to think opposite for the revolve, so I'll show you what I mean. When you go to 3D and you go to revolve and you see what you're going to get, you know, if I'm drawing a potted plant holder, you know, that's something similar to what I want. Maybe it's too thin, and that's fine. You can always adjust it. Direct select or A, grab that anchor point and bring it out wider, and you can kind of see, play with the design. So there's one. Here's another. Imagine I have a door there. It makes sense. Maybe the pot plants go right on the door. Okay, and you can always use your grid to help you line these guys up. And then here's another thing to use your symbols for. And then here's another thing to use your symbols for. You can always just take and grab these, put those in there, and then you have potted plants. Alright, so I think that should be enough for you guys to kind of get on your way making your own urban scene, which will be what your next project is. And just keep in mind that just because I showed you this doesn't mean that's all there is, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of ideas of what you could do. You know, you could, with the same way we made the billboard, make benches, and the way that we did some live paint objects from different images we grab from the internet. You can have a lot of fun with designing that scene, and the same thing with the symbols. And then again, don't forget things you already know, like playing with the fills to find textures and patterns, like brick patterns, um, finding things you like, and playing with the blend modes and opacity can also help. And then also keep in mind something as simple as gradient, right? So my sky, ground, buildings, all that. And you can come up with something pretty impressive. And here's another thing to use your symbols for. You can always just take and grab these, put those in there, and then you have potted plants. All right, so I think that should be enough for you guys to kind of get on your way making your own urban scene, which will be what your next project is.